on where we're going. The open road feels feels like home. We got no plans, who needs them though? The open road feels like home. We got no plans on where we go. The open road feels like home. We got no plans, who needs them though? In the shelter, all we need is love. All we need is love in the shelter. All we need is love. All we need is love.
Waiting, patient, only thing that I've never been good at. No, no, chasing ways to have you to myself just like I should, yeah. Controlling all of my thoughts, I want you on my body. Turning me on, baby, you know you got me. Got me tripping over all of these lines, I can't fight you. I'm spinning down, head over my heart, turning inside out. Love me in the dark, looking at you now. I can't get enough when you touch me like that. Stick around, swear when we're together, heaven's on the ground. I'll do this forever, looking at you now. I can't get enough, I don't know how you did it. Boy, you got me spinning round your bedroom. Touch me like the sun touches the morning. Yeah, yeah, wind me up one look and you could read me like a story. Controlling all of my thoughts, I want you on my body. Turning me on, baby, you know you got me. Got me tripping over all of these lines, I can't lie, yeah. I'm spinning down, head over my heart, turning inside out. Love me in the dark, looking at you now. I can't get enough when you touch me like that. Stick around, swear when we're together, heaven's on the ground. I'll do this forever, looking at you now. I can't get enough, I don't know how you did it. Boy, you got me spinning round my head, around my bed. Do it again, no going back, got it bad. Round my head, around my bed. Do it again, no going back, got it bad. Spinning down, head over my heart, turning inside out. Love me in the dark, looking at you now. I can't get enough when you touch me like that. Stick around, swear when we're together, heaven's on the ground. I'll do this forever, looking at you now. I can't get enough, I don't know how you did it. Boy, you got me spinning.
Baby, don't leave me alone. Baby, I'm stuck in a cold. I'm begging you. Baby, you should get on board. Baby, you should get on board. Baby, I'm stuck in this cold. I'm begging you. Oh, what else can I do? Oh, Would you hold me if I told you we can just run away? So come, my darling, let me help you. We can follow the sun and leave the rain for somebody else. Let's help ourselves, leave our troubles on the shelf. And don't you worry, we're gonna find all we need in our sunset paradise. All the sidewalks and the highways, they will turn into dust as Mother Nature covers over every street we take and lead the way for somebody else to help themselves, leave their troubles on the shelf. So don't you worry, we're gonna find all we need in our sunset paradise. Hey.
Right, a very warm good morning, everybody. On behalf of EPMF and Eurometaux, welcome to Reach and Raw Materials, Achieving Europe's Green Deal Goals Together. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to those of you in the circumstances who've been able to join us in person here in the room, as well as the warmest of welcome to our very large online audience of over 200 people joining us for the debate, including, I know, quite a number of people who were not able to join us in person today due to circumstances. So welcome to all of you. My name's David Rose. I'll be guiding you through the next 90 minutes of this debate and joining you for the lunch afterwards as well. Now, a brief bit of context before we start then, before we get down to business. I think we all know that the EU Green Deal requires new and urgent investment into strategic raw materials and strategic raw material value chains. At the same time, we have chemical policy action at the EU level, which of course is needed to ensure high environmental and health standards and protection across the life cycle. Achieving both of these together, balancing chemicals policy with raw materials goals, obviously I think we can all agree, and I don't think there wouldn't be a common ground, that we need a joined-up approach here, where partnership will of course be key. Especially now that metals like lithium, cobalt, and silver, among others, are under review for new chemicals rules. Now, with this in mind, I'd like to get very concrete here for a moment and just give two very brief examples of this, of where there can be opportunities to better balance these two areas of legislation. So let's take the example, first of all, of lead. Now, some of our people in our audience may not know the role that lead actually plays. It's a non-substitutable necessity as a carrier to extract the platinum and iridium that we need for the EU's hydrogen goals. So on the one side of this balance between the two policy areas, we have a clear goal in the CRM, the Critical Raw Materials Act. 15% of EU palladium iridium supply needs to come from recycling by 2030. But on the other side of the balance, we also have lead's regulation from multiple and overlapping angles. This does create a real availability pressure for lead on a practical level, and frankly does also present a tangible risk, a measurable risk, that iridium recyclers will face in the next 5 years. So there's one example of where we have opportunities to better balance these areas. Let's take a look at another relevant example in the battery area. Lithium, a raw material we're all very familiar with, I think. This is clearly a key enabling material, but let's be clear about scope here. We need 35 times more lithium, 3,500% more in terms of demand by 2050. That's a large amount. And so the Critical Raw Materials Act recognises this. We want 50% of EU lithium supply from domestic processing by 2030. But again, in terms of balance and achieving an optimal balance here in a constructive way, we have at the moment lithium's potential 1A hazard classification. And this is pending at the moment, pending scientific review at the request of the Commission. So if it is 1A or 1B classification, there's a potential further 5-year process there. And this can create high and immediate business uncertainty for lithium investors in Europe. Let's be frank, boardrooms are making decisions today about opening new facilities in Europe a decade from now. So delay can be a counterproductive thing. So this brings us to our debate then, and where our focus is in the next 90 minutes. As you can see on the slide, we've got 2 core aims to focus on. How EU chemicals policy reform can and should be designed for a successful green transition, and in parallel, how we can raise coherence, this balance I mentioned, between EU chemicals policy and raw materials legislation. We'll focus on these aims in 2 steps here, up to lunch. First, I'm going to interview Aurel, a director from DG Environment, to mine his views on this issue. And then we'll convene our panel together with industry, civil society, and member state representation to look into these issues with one clear focus. We want to focus here not on further defining the issues, because we have a good understanding, I think, of many of the issues, but we also want to focus on solutions. How can we achieve a better balance between EU chemicals and raw materials goals and policies? So with that in mind, could we welcome up to the stage, please, ladies and gentlemen, our interviewee from DG Environment, Aurel. Join me for one moment, Aurel. Before I start with Aurel, though, you, our audience, here in the room and online, we also want your input in the debate. You can do this in 2 ways. Our online audience, the usual method for the raw materials dialogues, via Slido. You see on the screen here, it's Raw Materials EU. And if I click on, for those of you in the room or joining us virtually, you can go to www.slido and enter the code #RawMaterialsEU, or you can scan the QR code you see here on your screen. And that'll allow you to pose questions directly to me, the moderator, and I'll then be able to take those questions and pass them on to our speakers as well. So please engage. And before we go into the interview, let's use that method of engagement just to get your views here in the room and as a virtual audience. I want to do 2 quick poll questions with you, just to get a little bit of an idea, and also for you, Aurel, and for our speakers, what our audience is thinking on these issues. So let's take a look, if we can, at our poll questions, please. So here's our first question. I hope you can see as well. To what extent do you think the EU's chemical legislation is aligned with the Critical Raw Materials Act 2030 goals? Is it poorly, weakly, strongly, neutral, or I don't know? I'll just give you 30 seconds, everybody, whether you're in our virtual audience or here in the room, just to share your views on that. Well, I think we've got a clear picture emerging there, that the general consensus is more towards the fact that they're poorly or weakly aligned at the moment, with about 3/4 of our audience in that position. Something to note and to bear in mind for all of our speakers. Right, I'll close this poll now, if you don't mind, and we'll launch our second question for you. Which priority areas, with an eye on solutions, which priority areas of EU chemicals legislation require improvement to better balance them with the Critical Raw Material Act's goals? Is it length of decision-making process on risk management, better alignment of prioritization systems, involvement of downstream users for more targeted data on substances, or closer integration with the EU's circular economy? Or is it all of the above? Again, I'll give you a few seconds just to get your answers in.
Participatory democracy. Yes.
Indeed, like the Commission, we're firm believers in the democratic approach, Aurel.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Key for any good solution-oriented debate, I think.
Absolutely.
But again, I think with our previous poll, keep voting if you still want to vote, but I think a clear picture is emerging here again. About 3/4 of our audience, half of our audience or more on all of the above, with quite a good portion, about a quarter, also wanting better alignment on the REACH prioritisation system to fully reflect complementary policy goals, that balance that I mentioned before. So now I'll close that poll and we'll get down to our interview. Okay? So thank you everybody for sharing your views, and I'd ask our speakers to keep those very much in mind. So Aurel, on to the questions then. I won't say elephant in the room because it's an overused phrase, but look, we know that the REACH revision was delayed. Yeah? The REACH review was delayed last year. And then Vice President Šefčovič, in his parliamentary hearing recently, talked about a targeted approach only to REACH. And then just yesterday, your commissioner, Commissioner Sinkevičius, talked of a realistic possibility, and I quote, realistic possibility that the REACH revision will be pushed to the next commission. But at the same time, since March this year, we've already got the Critical Raw Materials Act on the table. So my question then, not only for the metals value chain represented in our audience, but also the relevant NGOs and other stakeholders, how should we interpret this signal from the Commission?
Thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity. It's a precious opportunity created by the European Federation of Precious Metals to have this discussion about a very topical issue. I would say, in response to your question, David, that we don't need to put so much emphasis on the REACH revision. It is an important opportunity to revise REACH, and our intention was to bring amendments to the REACH regulation in order, among others, to accelerate and facilitate the decision-making processes, including in relation to restrictions and authorizations. But I would say that not everything, the Commission is committed to work and find solutions also within the perimeter of the current REACH regulation, with its limitations, but there are still many things which are possible, and certainly we are able to interconnect the existing REACH regulation, in spite of its relative limitations, with the more recent Critical Raw Material Act. This requires not only the commitment from the Commission, but also an interest from the economic operators to come to the Commission and to talk us about the concrete problems, or investors, what the concrete problems and concerns they have. And we will be able to tailor restrictions and authorizations procedures in order to take into account, for instance, the essentiality of the uses of certain metals for technologies which are indispensable for the green and digital transition. So I would say, to conclude in a nutshell, the REACH revision, whenever it will come, next year or at the beginning of the next college, will be an opportunity to accelerate and to simplify things. But even in the absence, temporary absence of such a simplification and acceleration, we remain committed to operate and to provide solutions and to provide facilitation.
Right, so I take from that two clear messages then. You acknowledge that there are limitations of REACH that need to be addressed, and at the same time, you recognise the need to accelerate decision-making processes, especially around critical metals, critical raw materials.
And we can make, while improvements are indispensable, I believe are very offer significant opportunities. We can make work things even under the current circumstances, because we are, all of us, committed for the political objectives which are illustrated or embedded in the Critical Raw Materials Act.
Okay, so a clear message there. Let me transition briefly then onto this challenge of balancing environmental protection with competitiveness. I think everybody acknowledges that environmental protection is a key element, no one disputes that, but of course competitiveness is also a key goal. So the REACH revision and any other actions you might take, as you've mentioned, are aimed obviously at securing a European competitive advantage and innovation to promote sustainable chemicals use in Europe. So question, what concrete steps is the Commission taking, and I mean here now to the end of this Commission, not the next college, to ensure that environmental protection and competitiveness are correctly balanced?
Yeah, I think this is reflected in a number of regulatory changes that we have already brought forward. The Critical Raw Material Act, which will oblige us to remain faithful to the priorities and political objectives. I would like to also refer to the regulation on eco-design for sustainable products, which was also tabled by the Commission last year, and I think we have legitimate hopes, I mean credible hopes, to see this adopted by the co-legislators before next June, when there will be the elections for the European Parliament. And that is very important because it will be able to facilitate the recycling of materials and the taking into account at an earlier stage of information related to hazardous substances. And I think I would refer also to while the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation is a horizontal legislation, I would like to refer also to a product-specific legislation where we will work together with the economic operators and with the manufacturers of those goods in order to make it happen and to connect REACH with this product-specific legislation. I am referring to the batteries regulation, where the Commission is expected, which has been adopted, has entered into force in August this year, and the Commission is expected to bring forward a number of implementing measures in the following few years. And we are working with this with our colleagues in charge of industry and the single market, and we will make it possible, because you refer, David, to the example of lithium, which is indeed indispensable for batteries. We are able to facilitate the continued use of lithium for batteries, so not to endanger the manufacturing of batteries in Europe, or the mining of lithium, if it will develop in Europe, but to frame this mining and the manufacturing in such a way so that the workers and consumers are protected. And because you have referred to a number of restrictions which are possible under the REACH regulation, I think it's legitimate to say that the safeguard measures or safety measures which the manufacturers will be expected to take refer more to the health and safety of workers, and a lot of these measures on a voluntary basis are already taken by a large number of manufacturers. So actually, in concrete terms, the measures to be decided under REACH will not bring, huge costs to the manufacturing industry. So the lion is not so dangerous as it is perceived, and is not roaring as strongly as it is described.
I like to see we're transitioning from elephants to lions at this stage. This is a positive sign. Okay, let's transition a little bit now onto the investment predictability question, because clearly that is a key one. There are obviously, I mentioned in my introduction, that there can always be sometimes a disconnect between political decision-making and legislation and genuine investment cycles. So if I want to invest in a facility in Europe, and my decisions today are a 10-year timeline to opening that facility, I need my certainty. And I think it's not a complaint from the industry side, but more of just a practical observation that we need to respect, obviously, the realities of these investment cycles to help achieve the goals we want to on a European level. So with that in mind, what action, again, are we going to see, or are we seeing from your side, can we rely on from your side, to raise a predictability, a long-term investment for investing companies so that they can help contribute positively, not only to environmental goals, but also CRM goals as well?
I think there are solutions already in place in order to increase the transparency and predictability. So, for instance, under the current REACH regulation, we have a candidate list which signals to industry that the substances will be subject to authorization or restrictions in the future. So it is sufficient to look into the candidate list already now, without the REACH revision, in order to get the flavor of what is to expect or not to expect. Secondly, we believe that the transparency which will be required from an early stage, for instance, under the Eco Design for Sustainable Product regulation, will also help to increase this predictability. And I think the procedures, which are the other procedures, restrictions and authorizations, which require an early involvement of the European Chemical Agency, ECHA, which is expected to organize public consultations each time a restriction procedure is undergoing, is meant to create engagement and transparency. So engage with these public consultations, engage also with the European Commission, come to us when it is about making big decisions in order to ask questions or to share with us your concerns. And we will be able, maybe not to tell you everything, and the Commission, contrary to the legends, doesn't know everything. We can research, we can reflect, we can share your number of concerns with you, but in general we are able to provide you with feedback about the big decisions and the big risks. So you will be more aware.
Okay, noted. Noted. So from the recycling point of view, again, I mean, I touched upon earlier the example of lead as an important carrier. What actions, again, we have some materials that have a classifiable hazard, but how are you going to better support recycling of these materials without adding unnecessary or avoidable barriers to the recycling value chain? Because clearly our ability to recycle very effectively is going to be key in this process of achieving CRM goals.
Yeah. In general, one should expect that recycling and mandatory recycled content will continue to rise as a measure, a regulatory measure under the circular economy approach of the Commission and of the European Union. I think it is fair to say that the Member States are also committed to this. So we will continuously work to make recycling possible and to facilitate the actions. Again, I would refer to the transparency measures which we will be able to take under the Eco Design for Sustainable Product regulation, or under a number of other regulations, maybe not necessarily relevant for metals, for the metals industry or for the critical raw materials, but like packaging or like the end-of-life vehicles regulations. So we are committed to facilitate the recycling and to find solutions, but they will require again also reasonable transparency from the industry about the use of hazardous substances in the manufacturing processes or in the structure of different products. So the counterpart of transparency will be more predictability from the side of the public regulator, which is the European Commission.
Okay, noted. Now you've mentioned and acknowledged already that there's scope and need for faster and more predictable processes around chemical management decisions. That's something you've already clearly touched upon. As a last question before we bring up our panel here, you talked a little bit about stakeholder consultation, but many of the stakeholders here represented have already highlighted in consultation processes the specific areas where they feel action is needed and have given clarity on that. So I come to my sort of final question. You've given some clear indications from the Commission side of what you're willing to do and what you acknowledge. What do you expect? What would be your one or two primary requests from the metals value chain upstream, downstream, to help facilitate what you're trying to achieve with your legislation? What would your direct asks be to the metals value chain? What can they do to work in good partnership with you, more than is already being done?
Yeah, I would, let's say, try to give the same message that we were giving to other industrial partners which are involved in the famous, in the use or manufacturing of the famous PFAS. And we have told to those chemical industry actors, instead of fighting the restrictions which will concern PFAS, engage with us. Let's partner, share information, be transparent also about the downstream uses, and inform your downstream users about the materials or the substances you are using, and instead of fighting the restriction which reflects a societal concern more often than never, I mean, the restrictions are in general not imagined in a dark room by the European Commission. Often they are coming at the initiative of member states or of the Commission.
So
but
can we say, Aurel, sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
Can we say then that if from the legislators' side and the ECHA side, the Commission and ECHA side, if the decisions being taken are evidence-based, then you'd ask industry to reciprocate that with a strongly collaborative
through transparency.
Yeah.
So contribute to creating, to create the evidence basis for an informed decision.
And we can then rest assured that decisions will be made on an evidence, scientific, rather than perhaps occasionally also a political mandate.
Absolutely. We need to understand that often such measures reflect societal concerns, and we cannot ignore consumers, we cannot ignore citizens, we cannot ignore votes. So we need to strike the fair balance between the public concerns and the feasibility of things. And where the essential, the uses of certain substances or metals or components are essential for the functioning of certain technologies and there are no alternatives, we will tailor the restrictions or authorizations to take this into account. And maybe a third message that I would give, or another message that I would give, is also invest in innovation, create alternative solutions, more sustainable solutions. This is very important as well.
Okay, thank you. Clear messages there. Could we offer a round of applause, please, for Aurel's contribution? Right, I mentioned 2 steps, an interview and then a panel. So let's transition without further ado into the panel. Could we welcome to the stage with a round of applause our panelists, please, ladies and gentlemen? And I'd call you up, please. So joining me here on stage together with Aurel, we have Wouter Guillout, the Vice President of Umicore and President of the European Precious Metals Federation, Hélène de Guy, the lawyer and jurist for emission reductions at Client Earth, and also Adli Manseri, who's Councillor for Environment at the Belgian Permanent Representation to the EU, and of course, the incoming Belgian presidency. So again, one round of applause, please, if we can. And if you don't mind, since our room is a little less populated than typically, could we give an extra strong round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you. That's better, thank you. Right, let's get straight down to business. We've heard from you already, Aurel, so I'll immediately bring in the others for some reflections and views. Wouter, straight on to you then. Just to let our audience know that Umicore, as you well know, is a leading European precious metals recycler and a company with concrete investment plans in EU battery supply chains. In this context, what are you asking from EU chemicals policy to support your operations in Europe and your investments, both from the competitiveness and sustainability perspectives?
Thank you, David, and thank you for the introduction. Just one precision. It's not only European. I think we're a global leader in circular materials technology, and that's important because some of you may know we have a growth strategy in battery materials. Yeah. We want to play a role and be a provider of services in the battery value chain, materials in particular, also close loop with circularity. And only last week we had an announcement in Poland with a joint venture partner that we built a new factory there, Gigafactory as we call it today. And only last night we had an announcement, a groundbreaking of our plant in Canada, because we also are developing footprint in North America, and we have that already in Asia. So if I look at Umicore in that domain, which is at the heart of, I would say, addressing climate change and what we as an industry can do, we are a company that have that footprint in different regions in the world, which also drives a kind of regional for regional approach. Maybe I'll get back to that later. And we're the only company that actually closes the loop today on the batteries, because we not only supply materials in Europe, but we also recycle end-of-life materials, including batteries. Having said that, to the topic of REACH and raw materials, I don't think there's so many species that combine the skills of chemicals management and raw materials. And actually, I find myself in my career track through Umicore in that space, I would say. I actually started my career in the business as a product stewardship manager dealing with the implementation of REACH. Now I find myself in a very different position, which is governmental affairs, but I've lived through some commercial and other experiences in the company. So I'm kind of trying to close the loop on different policies that interact with each other. It is not always easy to see where the connects are, because Critical Raw Materials Act has its own purposes, I would say, and objectives in terms of provision of raw materials and kind of creating a certain strategic autonomy. And on the other side, we have chemicals policy. Let's talk REACH, since 15 years, which is well known now, but which seems to be still, when I listen to the introduction, I still recognize elements of 10, 15 years ago that we kind of found ourselves in trouble. And I'll give the example of cobalt. Because cobalt is important to the company, not surprisingly connected to the battery materials, of course, the lithium-ion battery materials. And we found ourselves more than 10 years ago in a conversation in Holland, and then very soon after in Brussels on a restriction proposal for 5 cobalt substances, which we kind of contested from the basics of the file, which were the carcinogenic and mutagenic reprotox properties. So what we did indeed, we went to talk to the different parties, including DG Environment. At the end, the restriction file has found a different life, but I talk about processes of years and years. We find ourselves now where this file should be, address concerns at the workplace through another piece of legislation, which is the occupational safety and health at the workplace. So a revision officially of the occupational exposure limits. That is where the challenge was. We could have known this if we had done a different process at the start. And I'm glad you opened the door and you say, like, industry can come and talk. That's true. I've always found an open door with the colleagues. But the point here is, I think that some of the procedures we are in can be optimized. There's certain information that can be collected before you do the risk management option analysis, before you do a priority setting of substances. This is something that is not new to any one of you who's familiar with chemicals policy, because this is what we've kind of signaled and tried to work on for years and years and years. And I think that is something that we should not miss out, regardless of a REACH revision or not. I think there's room for improvement, but also to formalize it a bit more than it may be today, so that files really get the proper attention from the start. And a warning to the industry, we must be willing to provide information. We have excellent cooperation programs like MISA, which was initiated by the previous, or Geert Set, at the time that he was actually leaving Chemicals Agency. He came to the industry and said, like, can we cooperate with you outside of the regulatory boundaries, a program to optimize your files? I think that was an excellent demonstration of what can be done in a cooperation. Next, we have the metals environmental exposure program, which is still running, I heard, until next year, which is another initiative of the industry to kind of say, together with chemicals agencies and regulators, let's work on the things that we need to provide. You can only develop proper files if you have the data. So it's also a challenge and a task for the industry to be willing to provide the right data if we suggest to the chemicals legislators that they should do a risk management option analysis properly, that they should do a prioritization exercise properly. They can only do so when they have the proper data. But my point is, do it up front. Don't initiate a restriction process, and I've been literally told, well, Walter, you know, we initiated that because otherwise we don't get the information from the industry. So we just put it in a restriction process, and now you seem to be open and provide the data to us. So that should not be the case. It's a loss of time. It introduces uncertainties with the people who have to decide on investment decisions, and yeah, that's a consequence of it.
So a clear message from your side about that, and I'm seeing a little bit of non-verbal communication from Aurel on that. I'll bring you back in a moment. Adley, I want to jump over to you now and bring in the member state perspective on this. We've heard from the metals value chain side from Wouter. And again, just to key things in, I think many of us in the audience know that Belgium's a leading member state at the EU level in driving chemicals policy ambition. And also in parallel, you're working really hard to attract investments into raw materials supply and battery recycling here in Belgium, with some notable examples of success. In that context, what are Belgium's priorities in terms of EU chemicals policy to help support that, balancing those goals, and also linking in already what we've heard from Aurel and Wouter as well in the discussion?
Thank you, David, and thank you for the invitation. I think that we have already the direction, we have the chemical strategy, we have the new circular economy action plan, we have also the zero pollution ambition. So we have acknowledged the necessity to ensure an environment free of toxic substances, but also the strategic autonomy when we see the Critical Raw Materials Act, but also the battery regulation. This is something that we have to work on, and I think that Aurel have rightly highlighted the fact that in those legislation, when we are trying to work as co-legislator on the fact that maybe some chemicals and some substances are priority in the substance, in the product design, this is something that we have in mind, and we will not lose it because of the strategic autonomy that we want to reinforce here in Europe. But we need a transition. And that transition requires for us, as Belgium, a clear and future-proof legal framework that encourages both innovation, but also the promotion of the competitiveness of our EU industry, the support of the research and development, but also the level playing field between all the industry, because now we are facing a lot of importation, the imports of substances that are not, or products even, that are not complying with the EU legislation. So all those aspects should be considered by the co-legislators. And when you are asking a member state, such as Belgium, what could be done? For us, for example, the Chemicals Agency, so the ECHA, should be a central part of our strategy. Why? Because this is a centerpiece of knowledge here in Europe, but also globally. We should reinforce that agency with the allocation of sufficient and sustainable resources, both human and financial, budgetary. I would just want to refer to the fact that with ECHA, all the industry are working for the new alternative methods. This is something that we are very proud here in Belgium, and we would like to push it globally, because with that kind of knowledge, we can go at the global level and say, see, we can have a greener chemistry, and this is something that we have to work on. Without the industry, working hand in hand with the public administration in Europe, we cannot face the competitiveness that we have globally. And so I think that this is the first part. The second part, when we are speaking about governance, I think that the restrictions and authorization mechanism are very important. And I can find that in each time that we are referring to the fact that, or maybe that substance, such as lithium, cobalt, is very necessary for the transition, We are not speaking about the fact that the restriction or authorization process are not predictable or are not good as a mechanism to protect and to ensure a high level of protection of human health and environment. We are touching upon a very critical issue, which is the essential use of that substance. And this is something we have to work on. Unfortunately, without the REACH revision, we won't have the good and very clear legal framework to encompass that notion within the authorization and restriction process, but still, I think that we can work with the actual REACH. And I would like also to highlight the fact that our Prime Minister, Mr. De Croo, during his speech at the UNGA, has referred to the green chemistry and has said that hand in hand with the chemical industry, we should show the path, but globally, and without taking that transition up front, both the public administration, but also the EU industry, I think that we would fail. We would fail because future is the transition, future is green, future is sustainable, future is the autonomy. Without taking part of all those aspects now, we will lose the competitiveness, but also the more desirable future, I think.
Okay, clearly noted, and some very clear points from you there about reinforcing ECHA. I know with interest you mentioned not just financial but also human resources to strengthen ECHA so that it's more capable to carry out its mandate more rapidly, more effectively. You mentioned obviously the importance of governance around essential use and also the wider picture of competitiveness also on the global level. With that in mind, Helen, I want to bring you in now as well. I mean, clearly from a civil society perspective, Client Earth has clear priorities around EU chemicals policy and how we can deliver that in the most effective way, while also bearing in mind the realities of wanting to achieve decarbonisation, which I know is also a key goal for Client Earth, as well as also making sure, of course, that we also protect the social aspect in Europe of jobs and competitiveness. So what are the priorities from a Client Earth perspective around chemicals management and that balance with other policy areas?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I will talk here on behalf of Client Earth, but we're of course part of a coalition of NGOs working on chemicals and environmental protection more generally. I think from a civil society perspective, it will come without a surprise that we are quite worried about the severe deterioration of the environment and human health, in particular because of chemical pollution. And we see that the EU framework is not up to the task. We were very happy about the chemical strategy for sustainability and the Green Deal in general, but there is quite a mismatch currently between the commitments and the actual framework, binding framework that could bring concrete change. Again, it doesn't come with a surprise. It's what we advocate for today, and we have been advocating for the past years, is a REACH revision, a revision of the current framework as soon as possible. We think it's necessary to implement the commitments of the chemical strategy, and we should not wait longer. Why is that so? Especially with regard to critical raw material. We think that this reform is the only one that is capable of setting a specific and clear direction for the chemicals markets, including for critical raw materials, especially in relation to the phase-out of all non-essential uses of the most harmful substances, and the minimization and substitution of the hazardous substances. For that to happen, within a REACH reform, we would hope to have, strengthening of information requirements, which is related to what was said earlier, simpler and faster processes to ban substances that are identified as highly concerning. And of course, from Client Earth's perspective, we think access to justice provisions are also really necessary. Of course, to implement the polluter pays principles and increase compliance with the current framework, which is very low at the moment, but also to enable victims of chemical pollution to get remedies, to access remedies. So for us, this revision is not only about increasing the level of protection for the environment, but it's also increasing predictability for all actors, including companies and investors. You've seen probably the work of ChemSec on that. I mean, it's quite clear that competitiveness and environmental protections go together. So here I just want to mention that what I heard in the beginning between the balance between environmental protection and competitiveness, for us, really detoxification and decarbonization, they really go together. There is currently huge uncertainty as regards the use of classified critical raw materials, but to support investment security, we need, one, to define essentiality, and I would go back to what Adli mentioned before. We need improved alternatives assessments under REACH, and we need much more work on safe and sustainable by design to push for alternatives to critical raw materials. I will end on the note also to, of course, from an NGO perspective, we think we should also think about having less generally, and so the use of those critical raw materials to have, to get more sobriety generally, and to not necessarily think about green growth in that sense.
Okay, clear points from your side. Aurel, we've heard quite a lot of comments there from our different speakers from the different perspectives. I'd like to give you a chance just to reflect on some of the things you've heard.
Yeah, I think there is a convergence among the co-panelists about a number of needs, essential uses, the recognition of essential uses, the need for simplification and acceleration, the need for information and transparency at early stages of the procedures, and preferably before restrictions and authorizations are launched. So information should shape the assessment of the public authorities about the risks and opportunities of different uses and substances, and the importance of enforcement and audits and proper staffing. I would say it's not only about ECHA, it's also about the national authorities, and I would like to say, so these are 4 key issues which we had also and we continue to have as major objectives when we think about the revision of REACH. They were priorities in our plans to revise REACH, and as we continue to work on the preparation of the amendments, which is not a simple task indeed, they will remain priorities. So even if the REACH revision will be brought forward more at the beginning of the next commission or next year, I'm sure you will see significant answers to these concerns in it. These are unquestionable priorities.
I'm with you. I think we've all captured from your side a clear message there that the Commission, and I'm sure then also by definition ECHA, are focused and aware and acknowledge these challenges. But the one question that keeps coming back to me when I think about this idea of speed of action is I'm still hearing a little bit, and excuse me for being so bold, but I'm still hearing a little bit here, when we review REACH, but that's going to be, what, 18 months to 2 years down the line.
That's
and I think a lot of people are still interested in the year to 15, 20, 24 months from now to then. Can we also take it that we're going to see action on these things rapidly?
Yes, also before the REACH revision, we will try, as I try to communicate in my initial intervention, in the absence of REACH revision, we will try to address these issues, and I think we have fairly good solutions in the current framework. It's a little bit more difficult, more challenging. Some procedures are incompressible, and we need to go by the book, but we will try to use them as good as possible, as well as possible, in order to offer predictability and an evidence-based regulatory intervention in each case.
Okay, clear from your side. Wouter, Helene, and also Adli, anything to add to what you've heard, or any reflections to add to what you've heard from Aurel?
Yes, I'd like to make a connect with the Critical Raw Materials Act and the raw materials topic as such, which is also an essential part of the debate here today. If we talk about innovation, there's lots that we can probably still do on the materials efficiency. So doing more with less raw materials. But we will still talk about the same materials. So that's a bit the point and the connect I want to make. Because in the end, innovation, yes. I don't like so much substitution as a terminology, because it's more like what's the right material for the right job to be done. That's where the innovation is, and can we make it more efficient? But inherently, we'll always keep on using substances that have some intrinsic properties that qualify them for certain hazards.
Yeah.
That does not mean there is a risk. And
Yeah.
that's always the returning debate. What's the risk analysis and the risk management? Not necessarily what's the hazard. It's not because it's a hazard, it needs a label, and it needs consequently, I mean, with a label come many consequences in practice at the plant in terms of packaging,
safety
transport,
measures.
etc. Yeah. So I think that is sometimes underestimated. So my point is certainly innovation, but also being more efficient with existing materials, which would address the Critical Raw Materials Act objectives inherently, but also within the chemicals management, I'm not such a strong believer of substituting, phasing out chemicals, but more having the right measures at the right level and for the right chemicals. So we will need REACH, and if not a revision, we'll need to make it more efficient, as I shared at the beginning already, and there are options, as you also agree, to do that in the current system.
Okay.
I don't want to enter into the debate, risk-based approach, hazard-based approach. This is very complex, and unfortunately, I don't have all the details on my head, but I just want to highlight that as a member state, when we have to protect the civil society, this is very important to know the hazards of a substance. And then, when we will talk about what could be the good approach and the most suitable approach to manage the risk of that substance, then I think this is kind of important to see, is it essential or not? Do we need that substance to encourage the transition, yes or not? Do we have to implement the restrictions procedure or the authorization procedure? But without the information on the hazard of substances, we will just work in the shadow, and I don't think this is like a future-proof approach. I think that we have to go to the transition, but also the transition to an environment free of toxic substances. And so if we see that one substances with intrinsic properties, such as cobalt, such as lead, are essential for our green transition, then we should react on this, but not to be blind regarding or facing the hazards of the substances. For me, this is very important, and I would just like to highlight the fact that we are not against the fact to use some hazardous substances. We are against the fact that we can have some risk raising from the use of those hazardous substances because we don't know the hazard of those substances. This is the kind of general message that we would like to share.
Clear. And Walter, I see you want to come back in on this, so please do.
Yeah, we're in for some debate, so I'll try to contribute to that. No, just to be clear, I'm not arguing here that we shouldn't do the data collection and know the hazards. I'm arguing with an example. Let's be concrete. Lead and lead authorization. We have a plant, a world-class refining plant of precious metals. We extract 17 precious metals from very complex materials, electronic waste, that we all have in our tools and gets discarded. You want to do that properly with the right efficiency measures, with the right measures for the environmental protection and the workers at the workplace. And then I come to the point of lead. Lead authorization brings in a conversation of a time-limited authorization of lead for what I quote an essential use in the refining process. Metallurgy is as such. Lead is a collector metal, just like nickel and copper is. It attracts certain other metals. It's essential in a highly efficient recycling operation, extracting up to the purest degree gold, silver, platinum, iridium, beryllium, etc., from very complex materials. Now, if we introduce as a society here an authorization for lead, that brings in a conversation in the company. What will we be supposed to do in a time-limited authorization for the use of lead in the heart of the refinery? We can't do without. So lead is something that has hazardous aspects. I can tell you, we know from 100+ years, we have our challenges with lead protection for workers and the environment and the human beings and the children in the neighborhood of the plant. We know all of that. That's an essential part of our operations and the risks we manage, because that's where the risk is. But the risk is not per se in the use of lead as a carrier material in the metallurgy. But the lead authorization procedure brings in that element, which I think upfront should be considered. That was my plea, not on collecting less data on the hazardous aspects, but before you nominate a substance like lead for an authorization procedure, before that step, do the right analysis, like really, do we have to make it a blunt lead authorization and use it as a kind of collection of information moment, or can we do that collection of information up front, like you also opened the door, there's an issue, possibly it will be nominated for lead authorization, but here are the facts. That's how it's been used in lead-acid batteries, in the metallurgy, as a protector of metal cables, etc. And then make the analysis. Do we really want to go still for lead authorization? That's why I brought the cobalt restriction. It was the same. Couldn't we have collected the information up front?
So Wouter, it's really then here, it's a question here, as you mentioned earlier then, about timing of this. So it's a clear message from your side that we really need...
framing.
We really need to do it earlier in the process and do it in a more targeted way.
Yeah.
And I hear the economic operator speaking to another possible initiator of restrictions, which are the member states, speaking to a member state. So it's not only the Commission which can bring such measures forward, but also the member states. And probably because we are speaking about the possible REACH revision, this is not going to change. We hear that the member states would like to retain this ability, and I'm afraid, we have to take this into consideration. But I mean, the concerns expressed by Umicore are legitimate, and we need to find solutions to give more upfront consideration before measures are proposed.
But member states sit together. Eh?
Yeah.
They have platforms to look at substances and prioritize. That's my point. At that moment, is there a template? Is there a structured way of collecting more information than hazardous volume in terms of the usage, the criticality, the circularity aspects? So that is taken into consideration in a structured way prior to come to a decision making. We know that process is there.
So a clear ask on your side for that, and I see that it's noted also on the Commission and Member State side as well. Right, we've reached a certain point now where I want to see what's coming in terms of questions in our room and in our virtual room as well. We've had some good discussions around some key aspects of this issue of balancing these different areas in terms of chemicals policy, in terms of critical raw material and Green Deal goals. Do we have any pending questions in the room? Anyone who wants to dig a little bit deeper? Anyone who's not convinced by what they've heard or wants more information? I see already that our virtual audience have posed us a number of questions. You can see, our panel can see here on the screen. Can we beam these questions up to the main screen as well, please? So let's pick these up, perhaps, and see who wants to address these. I'll take them a little bit from the top here. Is it appropriate for industry stakeholders to have a voice at evidence-based gatherings such as the Carcal panels? An interesting and quite specific question. Wouter, you got a view on that? Since it nominates you a little bit in there.
Well, I'm not a procedural specialist, so but I would say yes.
But I would, I'm not necessarily a procedural specialist, but of course the Commission is in charge of these procedures, and I would say that you don't need to seek such a role in the Caracal panels because the evidence base is run by, and the evidence collection is run by ECHA. And ECHA runs this in a transparent way, not only through the committees where the member states are represented, but through public consultations where the industry can contribute and can shape the evidence-based. You want to be in the same room with the member states? That's a little bit more difficult, and you have to accept also that in any decision-making process, this cannot be done, I mean, there is a part of engagement and there is a part of deliberation. And deliberation in any democratic regimes can be done only according to some stricter procedures. But in the evidence base, you can shape this in other places than the Caracal panels.
Okay, so from your side then yes, but not necessarily specifically.
Yeah, but yes, but in another way.
Okay, I think the question for me reflects a little bit the concern perhaps of some industry stakeholders that they reply to a consultation and then that information may or may not be fully picked up, and there's not a transparency from their side about to what degree perhaps it is being fully considered in deliberations until the end product of legislation or proposed legislation comes out of that. Is that a concern that you can understand?
It's a concern we can understand, but we expect also the industry to understand that such decision-making processes and deliberations need to take into account multiple factors. As I've said, we need to balance the feasibility and the concerns of the economic operators and the technical and technological feasibilities and limitations with the societal concerns. And as we live in a world and in a society which is so sensible and so sensitive to different concerns and to different influences, we need to increase our degree of awareness about the societal concerns. The regulators must balance all this. So the economic operators need to think how they build their public engagement. And maybe you don't need always just to target the Commission or the Commission and the Member States. Maybe you need to explain this to the public at large as well.
Okay, Walter, so you need to explain this to the public at large. And I'll bring you in, Helen, as well. Walter, would you have a view on that? That the industry needs to explain these things better to the public as well?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, public is a key stakeholder of such debate. So just trying to think through what exactly we can do apart from what's happening already.
Well, I must say, when I said this, I did not have in mind now lead or cobalt. I was reflecting about the engagement we had and we continue to have with the manufacturers of PFAS. And yeah, there are some big chemical companies, and we told them, I mean, say what you tell us, think about speaking to the public in the European Union or in the United States and in North America. Yeah. Would you say this to your public opinion?
Yeah, but I can speak from our experience with lead in the lead refinery, as I said, and with the challenges to manage risks for the environment and the people, not only in but also around the plant. This is a public debate, but this is a very structured public debate with the right stakeholders from the Flemish government, from the city, from the neighbors, etc., which works very well actually. And we can show to them what we do and how that improves year by year. Yes. They can ask questions. They have the platforms, and
very good.
Even on a voluntary basis, there are blood samples taken to measure the lead.
So we've got some good examples of this already being done. Helen, you wanted to come in on this as well.
No, I just wanted to say that this actually already happens. I mean, there are many calls for evidence that happen, for example, during the restriction process, way in advance, way before the restriction process starts. So it's hard for me to believe that industry stakeholders still feel they're not included when this happens sometimes years before. And for authorization is the same. The process is so long. So when you are in candidate list as a substance, I mean, it sends a strong signal. So I think currently that's not really the issue. I think industry stakeholders, like independent scientists, I mean, everyone is really included in the process. And the member states, including in the PFAS context, have involved industry stakeholders like way before that. And I mean, several subgroups of PFAS have been restricted or banned even at international level years ago, sometimes decades ago. So I mean, at one point, there needs also to be good faith from all stakeholders to really want to make things change and to be involved also at the right timing. Because when you just get out of your cave when the process starts, then yes, indeed, it's a bit late. But there have been consultation processes way before that. So
okay, duly noted from your side. Right, let's pick up the next one then. So the EU targets non-toxic material cycles. It's back to recycling a little.
We have questions also in the room.
And we have if we do have questions in the room, I'll jump to the room and then I'll come back for our online audience to your questions too. I see one here. I see one here, I see one here, and I see one here. And another, we've got a few. Can I ask, please, introduce yourself briefly? Please don't give us a long dialogue. Give us a straight question for the panel. Thank you.
Yes, is this working? Yes.
It is, yes.
So I'm Ioana Bere from the NGO ChemTrust. We talked about lack of information a lot, I feel. So there is this obligation in REACH that says that the industry actors need to submit the information. There is also an obligation to update the dossier. So my question is, why is this not working? What should be changed in this article in REACH to give industry more opportunity to give ahead the information that they need to give to the regulators for them to take the right decision? So I guess it's a question for...
For Wouter, yeah. Okay, I'll let you pick that one up.
Yeah, well, indeed, these articles describe how things should work and what the different steps are in the process. I speak from the experiences that I lived through, some of them, and some things may have changed to some extent, but my point is that, I mean, there's a difference between circulation of a first initiative to collect data and getting closer to the reality of the expression of concern on certain substances and the identification as possibly we will nominate this for restriction and authorization. I think that's where the tipping point is. Not general articles describing the need for collecting of information, but how is this information collected, at what level, and by whom is it asked? And public consultation is one thing. Indeed, I mean, companies do submit information, but probably not always on the level and the details that are required to make the right assessment. And that was my plea. Introduce in the optimization of REACH and lack of REACH revision tools, I call it a template, that requires industry to submit the information, but authorities to take that into account before they go to the next step of the
be more specific in the type of information that you need in order to make a good decision.
Yeah. Because, of course, I understand your point that the tools are there and the initiatives are there. It is more, what is the moment that you really activate somebody to come out of their cave and to provide the data that the other party needs? I think that is where we need to identify the tipping point. I mean, it exists. But how do you structure it that indeed this information is, and more detailed information is shared than in a simple...
So a clear opportunity there then, you mentioned the idea of a template, for example, to ensure that the information that is provided is the right level of detail.
But not only on hazards and volumes, on all the other type of information.
The full scope of things. Okay, I hope that addresses the question. On to our second, and then third, and then fourth question, please. Yes.
Thank you. Julian Schenten with Client Earth. We have talked a lot about essential use, and I also think that this can help to reconcile both the goals of REACH and of the Critical Raw Materials Act. However, to do this in the current REACH creates some uncertainties, and you don't need to be a prophet to see that industry will go against restrictions that are based on essential use without a clear framework on this. So one might think about tweaking the annexes at least, and the least thing that the Commission should do is to put out as soon as possible the Commission communication that defines the essential use concept. So maybe we can give Aurel also the chance to give us something today. Are you aware when this will be out? Because this is separate from the revision, right?
It should not be separate from the revision of REACH, because you do not modify the regulatory settings through a communication, which is a policy paper. So the policy paper is like the thunder which announces the
storm.
The storm, yes. So we need also the storm, not just the thunder. We need the legislative amendment. So our approach is that the communication should accompany the modification of the REACH regulation, which operationalizes the application of essential uses. But again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, in the absence of this important modification, which we miss as well, we can operate in the existing framework through the list of the candidate list, through the existence of the candidate list.
Okay. Right, over here, please, and then we'll go over here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Kasper Chmielewski, Euromines, Extractive Raw Materials Sector. I have a question, but before that, we participated in a previous dialogue on raw materials, and there is a very strong indication in that panel that Europe has exported the environmental impact for very long, and this is currently a case where Europe is leading in regulation and industry is adapting to it, but there is a price for it. So my question is on the trade-offs, actually. What are the trade-offs in terms of bringing the deal to the Green Deal so that the industry stays in Europe and continues on that leading role in sustainability? And second question is, sorry for that, but if for the Commission, would the clean transition dialogues will include also the raw materials? I mean, the one that Soteo has announced and hydrogen just happened, will Commission organize one with raw materials? Thank you very much.
Aurel?
It is possible that the critical raw materials will be on the list of industry dialogues that the Commission will organize. This is a decision which is still in the making, but it's by no means that critical raw materials are low on the list of priorities.
I could just come in there, if you'll allow me, what I've heard there is it's possible, but I haven't heard a signal that it will be the case. I could read your answer.
It's not us, it's not me who takes the decision, but otherwise, if
could I
this
rephrase
reassures you more,
Aurel, if you allow me,
we will proactively propose to...
Aurel, on the balance of probabilities, can we expect critical raw materials to be included in that, noting its overarching priority on the European policy agenda?
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
the answer is
okay.
You know how to extract a positive answer.
I am
David.
my first degree
without
I must confess,
torture instruments.
my first degree is in geology, and I have some specialization in extraction. Okay, right. Moving on to
and the first question. No, I would like to address the first question asked, which was essentially about the competitiveness and how the European industry can retain its competitiveness compared to other jurisdictions of this world, which are of lower sustainability ambitions. And specifically we raise, maybe I should not name the name, but I still tend, because a lot of industry floats us the competitive virtues and advantages of China as a jurisdiction. So if you think that Europe as a jurisdiction with its democratic system and societal ambitions is too heavy burden and is too you think that the way in which China relates to its society and to the democratic system or political system that it has, I think we need to reflect again on this. I would say, but in a more constructive way, I would say the following. Sustainability is part of the competitive advantages of the European chemical industry. Continue to invest in this. Continue to innovate, and while the ambitions of the European system brings costs in the short run, in the medium and long run, you will retain this as competitive edge. Why? To paraphrase Martin Luther King, the arc of history is long, but it tilts towards sustainability. So in general, the other jurisdictions follow Europe when it comes to sustainability. So you will have the advantage of the first mover if you invest in innovation and sustainability, and you will gain competitive edge. The costs of the others will be incurred later, but will be more expensive than yours.
Assuming, of course, we have the right framework conditions to facilitate that here. You want to come in, Adli, as well, I think, on this.
Yes, regarding the fact that maybe Europe is more stringent regarding the chemicals policy, I could only oppose Aurel regarding the answer that you have just given. This is typically the kind of an answer that the member states are very supportive of. I would just recall that the last week at Bonn, there will be a global framework adopted regarding the management of the risk of chemicals. This is an international instrument in which Europe was very upfront, and I think that all the delegations around the world are waiting for the position of Europe regarding the chemicals risk management. We are the pioneer. We are the one dealing with the most important issues and just showing the path to a more green and sustainable chemistry. We are the actors for the future, so we don't have to miss this opportunity. Otherwise, there will be others on that plane, and we will be just lost. So thank you, Aurel, to tell that we should invest here in Europe. We should be sure that we are green, that we are sustainable, and just show the path. Also, regarding as a member state, for us, the import issue is very important. When we have to ensure a level playing field, we should be sure that the rules applied outside Europe, even if this is another jurisdiction, that this industry just following the same rules that our EU industry are following here in Europe. This is also, for me, a responsibility of all the EU industries around the world. If you have stringent rules in Europe that applied, maybe you should apply it also, maybe voluntary, in other jurisdictions, just to show the path. So for me, this is a message from EU industries, but also EU administration and public authorities.
Okay, clearly noted. So we come to the questions here and here, and I'll come back. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Samuel Mitchell from the Public Affairs Consultancy Grayling. Well, first of all, thank you very much. I think that was a very interesting discussion. But coming back to the question of essential uses, I've heard what you say, Aurel, and thank you for this regarding the potentially using the candidate list, waiting for the new REACH. But after reading the consultant report on the essential use, for me it is still a bit unclear to understand what is essential and what is not. As you mentioned, we need to predict and have enough time for the industry to innovate in a better and more sustainable way. We need more certainty on which substances are in the scope or not. So my question is, could you give us a bit more detail or a bit more clarity on what do we consider essential?
Yeah, in principle, so this communication should should explain all these elements and should decode the regulatory changes which would be operate in parallel as part of the package by the REACH revision. But to put it in a nutshell, so the essential uses will have to meet two conditions. There are no alternatives, and they are critical for uses which are critical for the health and safety of people or for societal uses. So typically you would say that uses for which there is no alternative and which are indispensable for the good functioning of technologies for the green transition, for instance, for renewables or electric batteries, or I don't know which other technology which is expected to have large-scale uses in our societies, or they are of large-scale uses already, would meet these criteria.
If I can ask a clarification there myself, when we say, and again, this has obviously been a subject of long debate over the years. I remember myself a debate around REACH in this 4 or 5 years ago on behalf of Eurometaux and EPMF. When we talk about no alternative, I assume this means no feasible alternative.
No feasible alternative, yeah. I mean, no alternative, in operational terms.
Yeah, okay, just to make that important.
Another solution that would deliver the same outcome.
Yeah, okay, clear. Okay, thanks for the question. Did we have a question over here as well? Yeah. Can we get the microphone, please? Oh, we have 2 microphones in one place. Let's be democratic and distribute those. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Jeroen Janssen, Umicore. All this discussion is very, very interesting, is also very much focused on product legislation. There is, if you talk about raw materials, if you talk about circularity, you inevitably have to talk about waste as well.
Yeah.
It's a very different subject, a very separate world, to put it that way.
Interconnected world.
Yes, but...
World. Sorry.
No problem. Do you see waste better interconnected?
What do you mean? I mean, we see, how to say, it's part of the same regulatory ecosystem, I would say. And we know how the environmental policy has evolved in this respect at member state level and at the European Union. We have started with waste, and then we have understood that we need to take a wider life cycle approach, so come with product regulation. Horizontal sometimes, or taking a vertical approach to a single product. But waste remains part of this system. So for instance, when we speak about recycling, end-of-life waste matters, barriers to recyclability matter as well, so we need to take this into consideration.
Okay, so a clear note there then that yes, we do consider waste. I think waste is considered, and a clear message from your side about how that is viewed as an important part of the whole cycle approach. Okay, I believe we have a question over here, and then we have one more, I think, from our virtual audience as well. Please.
Yes, Guy Tirand, Director General of Eurometaux. I'd like to rebound on some of the points I have heard and bring some sort of pragmatic reality back in the debate. The reality, when we speak about Europe leading in terms of sustainability, is true. There is no doubt about that, and we see that in how our companies are performing in terms of energy efficiency, environmental efficiency, and so on. But when I hear that we need to continue to invest in Europe, yes, we would like to do that. But at the same time, we hear the notion of balance. We hear the notion of, yes, but it's a political decision. Yes, but it takes time to reconcile.
Yes.
Your colleagues in the Commission, in other DGs of the Commission, call us to come and sit at the table with them because they want to discuss what is the business case for industry. And the business case for industry is one, when we speak about global companies, is one that they face in all regions of the world. And at the time they say, yes, we need to invest, we are willing to invest, comes the question, where are we going to invest? For the batteries, for the other solutions for the Green Deal. We face China that says when we have an objective there, the government is deciding and impose. Or in the US, when we have a solution there, the government is providing incentive, IRA. Here, we start thinking about how to regulate. It takes years. And time is the issue. So the reality for investing and translating innovation plans into the reality of delivering is facing that time issue, and is facing what for us is a world of uncertainty about Europe. When in industry I speak to CEOs, they tell me I have priority 1, 2, and 3. When I hear the Commission and I interact with you or your colleagues in other DGs, yeah, but we need to reconcile priority A, B, C, D. So there is no hierarchy, so there is no clear signal. And this is a bit what is creating that big question mark that all our companies are facing at this stage.
Yeah, I have two points to make in response to your concerns. First of all, this is why I insisted at the beginning, our door is open. When you want to make, or anyone else wants to make a big investment decision, come to us to talk and to share your concerns, your worries, so that we shape the solutions together. So in other words, our message is simple. Embrace change, do not oppose change, embrace change in order to shape it. And our door is open to shape it together with you. The second message is, yes, we are in Europe in a different mindset compared to other regulatory regions of this world. People, citizens, people living around us have another relationship to risk and change compared to other continents. And yes, we have a different approach to the regulation compared to North America or to China. But the fact is, and I'm not saying this with no arrogance, it's just a fact, that in general, the others follow our lead in terms of sustainability. China is following the regulatory lead. So what you are buying by moving, for instance, chemical production from Europe to China, you are buying maybe for 10 years. So do you think that $1 billion investment is worth for 10 years? Some economic operators apparently think like this, but we believe that we can find solutions in Europe to make investment worth in Europe and production worth in Europe. And offering, we can tailor the necessary guarantees and safeguards and clarifications so that we balance, indeed, we strike the fair balance between the concerns of the public and your business interests.
Okay. Clear your answer to that. Wouter, is there anything from the Umicore and from the EPMF perspective you want to add to what you heard from Guy there, from Eurometaux, and also what you heard in terms of response?
Well, I'm happy both for the precious metals part and let's say the batteries and other metals part covered by Umicore. I'm happy to hear the open door, but I think that's actually very well aligned with what I mean to say with improve the efficiency of the process, do the right discussions, collect the right information, and industry needs to provide information, but at the right moment, so we don't get into a nomination of or a discussion that takes so many years to then retune it to the right process. So I think I'll leave it with there, but I actually hear a good correspondence with my plea, but we need to make it practical and be clear on what.
I would agree. I think we can all hear a little bit of coalescence towards some commonality of view here. But then, of course, the question always remains, and no 90-minute debate will solve this on its own, that we need to make that very operational in terms of actions on the ground.
We have lunchtime.
We do indeed have our lunchtime discussions too. With lunchtime discussions in mind, thank you for the questions from the room and questions from our virtual audience. I keep an eye on clock. It's time to wrap up now. So I want to bring things together just with a last word from each of our panellists. Our frame was clear for today, looking at how we can achieve Europe's Green Deal goals together, balancing reach and raw materials, how we can be more efficient, we can be faster, we can be more targeted with those things in a collaborative way, not an oppositional way. Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that in mind and that frame in mind, what would be key takeaways from each of you? Adley, I'll start with you, and then Helene, I'll come to you. Then you, Wouter, and Aurel, I'll give you briefly a last comment. So let's kick off with that. Adley, what would be your takeaways on this debate today from the Belgian perspective?
Not from the Belgian, from my side, and then maybe I will try to take that takeaway to my ministries. I would say that the notion of responsibility of each actor is very important, both the industries but also the public authorities. For me, if we bear in mind that we are all responsible for the green transition and to have a success in that green transition, we should be all responsible of that. And also, I think that the notion of information, because I think the key is the information. This is the responsibility of all of us. If all of us, we are on that track and we are transparent, we work all together hand in hand, I'm pretty sure that we can ensure a very good competitiveness of the EU industry here in Europe.
And very briefly, what is your take on this call for faster and more efficient procedure? Is that something you see as a positive step forward?
Of course, and this is our call in Belgium. We would like to have more efficient procedure.
Very clear. Thank you. Helene, on to you.
Yeah, I think Adley stole some of my words.
Oh, sorry. Common ground indeed.
Yes, I think transparency is key for us, both from industry, of course, with provision of information, but also from authorities, because we are left a little bit in the dark at the moment. Mm-hmm. And for us, this is not how democracy should work. If the authorities need our help, we also need them to help us with understanding what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I think that's very important, indeed, at least from civil society side. And then collaboration is also very important. I think it's really good to hear what industry stakeholders are struggling with. it's also good for them to understand that, you know, it's not just about Europe. There is actually a planetary crisis, and it's good that the EU takes this more seriously than others, but, you know, let's not forget the big picture here.
Okay, very clear. Wouter?
Yeah, I'll use the 3 words that I had noted on my paper, and I did not use them until now. We can only remember 3 things. So it's coherence, efficiency, and predictability. I think that is in essence what we need. I heard the open door invitation from Aurel, and just one thought on that, Aurel. I think we need to make it practical. We need to be clear. Happy to have an open door with DG Environment, but I repeat, repetition is a good learning school. I repeat my plea for embed it, enshrine it in the way of working. Be clear on at what stage that additional information is needed. Use templates for that matter. So enshrine it in the process.
Yeah.
Okay, very clear. And Aurel, finally on to you.
Well, 3 sentences. Not only we hear your concerns, we share them. The second sentence, the REACH revision would be the ideal vehicle for addressing your concerns. The third idea, we will continue to work to prepare the REACH revision in order to address these concerns and a few others as best as possible. But until this REACH revision is adopted by the Commission, we are committed to make it work under the current regulatory regime as good as possible, and to work with you in order to deliver.
Okay, very clear from your side as well. Could we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our speakers? You see my final message on behalf of Eurometaux and EPMF here on the screen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for making the effort in these difficult circumstances today in Brussels to join us in person, and a big warm thank you to our virtual audience as well. I'd like to just remind you, note in your calendars, please, if it's of interest to you, 6th of November, the last of this year's sequence of raw material dialogues, in this case turning our optic towards electricity market design and setting the foundation for resilience in Europe for industry. And you'll be able to join us here with the European Copper Institute and Eurometaux, with myself as well, on the 6th of November. Thank you very much. For our in-person audience, you'll find your networking lunch outside. Thank you.
Let's dive in for a love and sweet.